Thanks, Claire. Well, the challenge today, I was thinking that perhaps I'd do the burpee challenge till he showed me what a burpee was. So now I've got to think of something different. Beginning of last year, I started a group called a D group, which is short for Discipleship Group. And the idea of a D group is that 3 to 4 people gather regularly every 1 to 2 weeks, and you go through the Word, study the Bible, and you keep each other accountable and you pray for each other. And so 3 of us did this last year, and we met every fortnight, and because of the year, we did that online. And when we started that, the idea of that group was that it goes for 12 to 18 months. And then what you do is you then disband, and then you go and do another group with another 3 to 4 people. So then beginning of this year, we've just started another group, and there's 4 of us. And that's my new D group. Now, this is not something our church is launching or whatever, but it's just a way to do discipleship. And so I journey with 3 other women, and they know in 12 to 18 months, we're going to disband, and we will have shared the leadership in that group. So then everyone feels equipped to go and do it another time. And maybe it would be that the 4 of us go and do 2 different groups. And that's called discipleship. And this year, at the moment, we're going through 1st and 2nd Timothy, so the book of Timothy. And so I thought, well, what I'll do is, at the moment, we've got no theme. We've just finished our life in the Spirit, and we're going to go through 1 Timothy 5, 1 to 10, which I thought was interesting. As she was reading, I was thinking, yes, this is an interesting passage, but it's good, isn't it, to go through the Word of God, and everything's different, isn't it? We can't just teach on the same things all the time. And the way you read the Bible, there are so many ways you can read the Bible. You can simply read it and just ask God to speak to you. What does it say to me? I know Maddie Archer, she has gone through the Bible over the last 2 years from beginning to end. And she used a Bible plan, thank you, in the Bible app. And she was able to do that. And I was her friend on the Bible app. So I could see that she was doing that. And there's fruit in her life because of that. And I know others that find a verse or a passage and they meditate on it. And they ask God to just really change their heart and speak to them. Then there's a SOAP method, which you may have heard of. And then I do a method at the moment called HEAR, H-E-A-R. And I keep a HEAR journal. And Stuart does a similar one. And it's H for highlight. So write down what stands out to you in the passage. Then E is for explain. So you might look at the context. Who wrote this passage? And who was it written for in the day? And then A is for apply. And you write down, how can this help me? And what does it mean in today's day? And what is God saying to me? And then R is for respond. This is your call to action. How will you be different because of what you have just read? So that's what I'm going to do today. That's how we're going to look at this passage today. And when I was looking at this passage, I highlighted a few verses. So often you just do one verse, but I've done a few verses. So verses 1 and 2. It says, never speak harshly to an older man, but appeal to him respectfully as you would to your own father. Talk to younger men as you would your own brothers. Treat older women as you would your mother. And treat younger women with purity as you would your own sisters. Then in verses 3 and 4, it talks about the church taking care of widows who have no one else to take care of them. And that also widows need to be cared for by their families if they have them. Then down further, what stood out to me in verse 10 was it talks about widows being well respected by everyone because of the good deeds that they've done. So they were the verses that stood out to me in this passage. And we could each read that passage and get something different out of it. So then we get to E in the here, explain. So here's an explanation of what was happening in this passage. So the book of Timothy was written by Paul, who was an apostle of Jesus. And Paul spent many years travelling around and starting new churches. And Timothy was a co-worker. And Timothy was younger, and he was probably in his mid-30s, they say. And he was passionate and he was devoted to Jesus. So Paul mentored him. And then eventually he sent him off to do missions in churches. And as a mentor, Paul wanted to be able to help him and guide him in that. And that's where he wrote these letters. And Paul heard about that there was some trouble in Ephesus where there was some corrupt leaders teaching incorrect views on what it meant to follow Jesus. And Paul wrote these letters in Timothy to give practical instructions on how to be the church and that how we can do church well. In these verses, Paul is saying that we need to show affection and respect our elders. Encourage them like they were our mother or father. And a commentary says, in Barclay's commentary, it says, it was said that it was the duty of a young man or woman to attach themselves to the best and most approved of them, to receive the benefit of their practical wisdom and help strengthen and direct them. Now, youth is defined in this culture as anyone under 40 years old. How does that make you feel? So it's just not youth as we know it now. Everyone's like, I'm a youth. So it's just not teenagers and children. But for me, as a nearly 49-year-old, I'm still keen to hear wisdom and influence over those that have gone before me to help strengthen and direct me from those that live well. But also, it's saying, in the same way we are to respect those older. Paul says we need to treat younger men as brothers, also with respect, and treat younger women with purity. And by purity in the day, this verse was aimed at the men of the day, saying don't treat them in a sexual nature, but rather a platonic friendship, with respect like you would a sister. But then Paul says that the church needs to take care of widows. But also, if widows have families, the families need to care for them because the church can't do it all. So he was very practical. Then Paul says that the widows and older generation need to be well respected because of the good that they've done. So in other words, the respect will come when people see that the life you lead is good. So then in our Here journal, we come to A, which is how do I apply this? And for me, as an over 40-year-old, I was personally challenged to be living a life that is worthy of respect. And that just doesn't happen. I need to continually be working at that. Who's just got it all together here? Who's over 40? You all? Anyone? Anyone? No, it's tough, isn't it? Making good choices, having a good attitude in life, be careful with my words, and just always not critiquing, and that's for me. But so much more, and it's just not easy. And I was also challenged to hear from those that have gone before me and are doing life well and hear what they've got to say, the ones I respect and look up to, and listen to their life's wisdom. Then I was asking God, what are you saying to us as a church here at Shire Salvos? And just as Paul was writing to Timothy, giving advice on how to be the church, giving him practical advice about this, we can also learn from that. And I think that he was saying that all generations need to treat each other with respect and make it our business to encourage each other. Care for each other, but also families, care for your widows because the church can't do it all. And instead of critiquing, let's look at the way that we can build each other up. And the youth, those under 40 or feel under 40, encouraging and listening to those who are older. And older generations investing in those younger. Spending quality time together and encourage them with your presence. Just loving generations well. And I think our church do that beautifully. Also, for those of us that are over 40, no longer youth, and really all ages, live a life that is worthy of honour and respect by bringing up our children well, being kind to strangers, helping those in trouble, and serving humbly. And it's been said, often people come to us and say, you've got a great intergenerational church, and we do. And I feel so privileged to be a part of that. And my son turned 21 this week, and we had a family party on Friday night, and it was the non-wild 21st. That's how the invitation went out. And we invited friends and family who have invested in Josh, who have done life with Josh, who have encouraged him, been there when he's gone through tough stuff, and really been the generations. And we've intentionally got people to do that. I mean, we don't ask them. We just make friends that are great people who come alongside him, and it's just such a gift. And this church is such a gift to our family. And you can see each week as all these children come and share, and, you know, often we hear the same thing, which is okay. Some people have a birthday every week, which is beautiful. But I just encourage you to keep speaking life over these children. And they remember everything you say. And I've said to my boys, when you speak to a girl, encourage them. They will remember the words you say. They will remember when you say something negative, and they will remember when you say something really positive. Then there are so many of you here in this room that have invested in your own families. Some of you have had and do have elderly parents, and sometimes it's not easy. And I think of people in this room who have done that so faithfully. I think of Amanda Reynolds, who's not here, who's journeyed with her mum so beautifully for so many years. And we honour her. I think of Judy Hindle, who so faithfully and boldly journeyed with Bram in his last few years. I think of Lynn. Where's Lynn? Up the back. Who looks after a mum, Betty, and helps her out. And then in the same way, Betty, you have invested in the generations for years. You are generous, you are encouraging, and we honour you today for that. I think of Claire Clifton, who is currently checking in on the Gates who are struggling at the moment. And she invests in the generations, those older than her and those younger. I think of Steve and Joe Cugley, who for years have invested in young children. They look after children at their own house. Like Joe comes to playgroup, runs playgroup, and is just investing in those children, and they will be forever changed because of that. All while they continue to care for ageing parents as well. I think of Kerry Daly, who does our pastoral care at Coffee Spot each Tuesday and looks after her grandchildren. She visits people in hospital, just caring and investing in the generations. I think of Jackie Smith, who comes to Mainly Music on a Thursday, who invests in those kids again, and your grandchildren and their parents, and we just honour you today as well, Jackie. There are just so many of you, too many to mention. I think of Stu Sims, who used to drive down to see his dad, looking after his dad. I think of Andrea Hosking, look after your dad, and there's just so many of you, and we just honour you today for doing it so well. And each of us investing in the generations and our own family, and then being part of a church and caring for each other on top of all that. And you can probably think of other people here in this room that are on your mind now thinking, yeah, they do that well. So back to my here method. The last letter is R, response. And right now, we as a church are going to do things a bit differently, and we're going to respond. And we're going to have a time of encouraging each other in this room. And so Joel and Mark are going to have a microphone. And I want you now just to think, who could you encourage in this room? It's always easy in these times to get up and talk about what God's doing in your life and talk about yourself. But now is a time to encourage people of another generation, or perhaps someone that invests in generations. And we're just going to have a space to do that. Their names may have already been said, that's okay. But right now, who is it that you need to encourage? And the microphone will go around, and we're just going to wait. And I encourage you just to stand when you've got someone on your mind. And maybe God's given you a word for someone in the room. We encourage you to listen to what God's got to say today.